The AK, perhaps the most popular family of rifles to ever be fielded, and one that's proven itself to be incredibly effective. But like all things in life, there was room for improvement with the AK, and so there have been many attempts to create a better Kalashnikov. Among these rifles, one stands out as a dominant force in video games. Of course, I'm talking about the AEK 971. But before we talk about the AEK, a word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus. Take control of your favorite Warhammer champions in this fast-paced, turn-based game. Tacticus is officially licensed by Games Workshop and features over 80 Warhammer 40,000 champions. My favorite is Battle Sister Vindicta, because I enjoy listening to the screams of my enemies as they burn alive. But you know what's better than one flamethrower? How about 2, 3, or 30? Fight alongside other players by joining a guild and take on even stronger enemies. You'll unlock exclusive currency to get special items from the guild store. Team up with your friends and purge the heretics together. Or, if you're feeling competitive, face off against other players and prove that your team is the best one. Feed your ego and earn exclusive rewards by defeating other players. Burning others alive has never felt this good. In Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus, with a number of different game modes and challenging events to choose from, you have full freedom over how you choose to play Tacticus. And with the developers consistently adding in new content, there's always something new for you to try. With an average rating of 4.5 stars across app stores, this game is worth your time. Don't miss out. Scan the QR code to download Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus for free, and use the gift code HelloFeb to get 2,000 gold and 50 Blackstones. Thank you again to Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus for sponsoring this video. The AK series of rifles has been a staple of modern combat. First adopted by the Soviet Army in 1949, the AK has been a part of virtually every single war since its introduction. While earlier variants of the AK fired the heavier 7.62x39 round, later versions would fire the smaller 5.45x39 cartridge, most notably in the AK-74. The AK-74 replaced the AKM as Russia's service rifle, and was meant to be a lighter rifle that would be more accurate and be able to put down more effective volumes of fire. By all accounts, the AK-74 and subsequent variants have been very effective weapons, but the Russian government wasn't satisfied. According to their analysts, controlled accurate bursts of fire was key to a soldier's success on the battlefield, and the AK-74 wasn't significantly more accurate than the AKM when fired in bursts. So in 1981, the Soviet Union commenced a competition to develop a new rifle that would replace the AK-74. Dubbed Project Abakan, the competition's intent was to find a rifle that would be, quote, 1.5 to 2 times more combat effective than the AK-74. There were a number of rifles that were submitted to the competition by some very notable Soviet firearm designers. From Simonov to Kalashnikov Jr., Russia wanted the best for their new service rifle. One of the designers was a man by the name of Stanislav Koksharov. Not much is known about him, other than that he was the chief designer at the Kovrov mechanical plant, and that he was one of the key figures behind the AEK rifle. The AEK 971 is similar to the AK-74 in many respects. It's chambered in 5.45x39, uses AK-74 magazines, and has a similar form factor to the AK-74, but its key distinction is an additional recoiling dampening system that serves to reduce the recoil of the rifle while firing in full automatic. While the AK-74 isn't a particularly hard recoiling rifle, it certainly has some muzzle rise when fired in longer bursts. Since one of the key features being evaluated in the Abacan trials was accurate bursts of fire, recoil reduction was key to achieving this goal. The AEK rifle went through many iterations. Earlier variants of the AEK were quite innovative. From rifles with polymer lower receivers, adjustable muzzle brakes, and fire rates of 1500 rounds per minute, the AEK was a product of unprecedented small arms innovation, especially in the Soviet Union. For better or worse, this was not to last. The Russian Ministry of Defense officials overseeing the development process of the AEK ultimately decided that many of these features were not worth including. So, the AEK rifle was scaled back. It still featured its recoil reduction system, and was able to demonstrably shoot more accurate strings of fire than the AK-74. But despite its simplification to conform with Russian government requirements, the AEK-971 ultimately lost to the rifle that would eventually become the AN-94. But while the AEK may have lost out in the Abacan competition, that wasn't the end for the rifle. While the AEK had lost to the AN-94, development continued on the rifle. Eventually, in the early 2000s, the AEK would be tested in small numbers by the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs, though it was never adopted in wide numbers. However, around 2010, the AEK began production once again, as orders came in from the same Ministry of Internal Affairs and several Russian law enforcement agencies. And in 2013, modified variants of the AEK-971 and the 7.62x39 AEK-973 were submitted to the Russian Army's Ratnik trials, a competition intended to select modern gear that would be distributed to Russian soldiers. Historically, the Russian government, like many other governments, was slow to adopt innovative small-arm designs. So it was with some surprise then that the modified AEK rifles passed the Ratnik trials in 2014. Now dubbed the Cord 6B67 for the 545x39 version and the Cord 6B68 for the 7.62x39 version, the officials involved with the testing noted that the 545 Cord 6B67 was noticeably more accurate than the AK-12 at ranges of 300 meters or closer. After some more testing, the determination was made in 2018. The majority of the Russian military would be issued the AK-12 as their service rifle, while Russian special forces would be issued the Cord rifles. While very different externally compared to the AEK rifles produced in the late 90s, the heart of the AEK lives on in the Cord. Production of the Cord rifles began in 2020, with the world getting its first real look at the weapon during the Ukraine invasion of 2022. So, what exactly makes the AEK such a special weapon reserved for Russia's elite? From its conception, the AEK-971 was designed to prioritize one thing: fully automatic fire. At the heart of the rifle is something called the Balanced Automatic Recoil System. Simply put, this is a system that counteracts the force of the bolt carrier cycling backwards. A traditional AK functions by utilizing a system called a long-stroke gas piston system. When a bullet is fired, some gas behind the bullet bleeds off into a hole in the barrel, called a gas port. This gas pushes on a piston, which is attached to a bolt carrier. The gas pushing back on the piston cycles the weapon and loads a new round. It's a simple and reliable system, but has one inherent flaw. The piston and bolt carrier combo is relatively heavy, and the force of it being pushed back translates into more felt recoil. The AEK solves this issue by having a counterweight above the piston. In the AEK, gas flows through the gas port just like in an AK, but splits into two different paths. Half of the gas cycles the weapon just like an AK, but the other half cycles the counterweight forward. This serves to counteract the force of the bolt carrier being cycled, and significantly reduces the recoil of the AEK. This is an oversimplification of the design, but that's generally how it works. In testing, the system proved effective. The AEK has very little recoil under automatic fire. However, this came at a cost. It's a more complicated system than the AKs, though arguably less so than the AN-94 that beat the AEK in the Abacan trials. Beyond its lack of recoil, the AEK also has some additional features that can be considered improvements over the AK. It has a folding stock that folds to the right side of the weapon, instead of to the left like on most AKs. This allows the stock to be folded, while retaining the ability to mount optics using the dovetail rail, something that cannot be done with most AK factory folding stocks. The AEK 971 also has an increased rate of fire compared to the AK-74. The AK has a rate of fire of about 650 rounds per minute, while the AEK 900 rounds per minute. Theoretically, this would allow a shooter with the AEK to put more rounds on target in the same amount of time compared to the AK, but in practice, this increased rate of fire was not much of an advantage. Most standard infantrymen do not require a weapon that shoots 900 rounds per minute with very low recoil. For most, the AK is a perfectly capable rifle, but Russian special forces are more likely to engage in close quarters combat, and are also more likely to use full auto. So, the AEK seems to be a good fit for such units. However, the AEK has not seen much use in the real world. This is likely due to the cost of the weapon, the complexity of the recoil-reducing system, and the ubiquity of the AK platform in the Russian military. In a vacuum, the AEK may be superior to the AK, but extensive infrastructure already exists to produce and support the AK. It would take a significant amount of resources to set up sufficient production for the AEK and its parts. And for a relatively small improvement over the AK, it doesn't make much sense. The other potential reason as to why the AEK hasn't seen much adoption is due to how rifles are used in modern combat. Most soldiers fire their weapon almost exclusively in semi-auto. The reason for this is simple. It's very difficult to hit a target in combat. Studies at the American military show that on average, about 1% of all small arms fire actually results in an enemy combatant kill. Though to be fair, this includes suppressing fire that is not intended to be accurate. Firing a rifle in fully automatic makes it that much more difficult to hit a target, so in almost every combat scenario, semi-auto is preferred. Since the AEK's recoil system is most effective in full auto, it doesn't make much sense to implement when the majority of users will be firing their weapon in semi-auto. So, why is this niche rifle such a notorious powerhouse in video games? In the real world, fully automatic fire isn't that crucial of a feature on a standard infantry rifle. No matter the organization, the majority of professional users fire their weapons in semi-auto. The reason for this is simple. It's much easier to hit a target when shooting a rifle this way. And in a chaotic situation, every bit of additional accuracy helps. Video games are a different story. In every shooter, the goal is to reduce an enemy's health to 0 before the same can happen to you. As a result, in most games, players will gravitate towards weapons that can do as much damage as quickly as possible. What this means in practice is that players will often choose weapons with a fast rate of fire and low recoil. From the ACR to the Chris Vector, these types of weapons have, and continue to be, fan favorites. The AEK 971's most notable features are its low recoil, high rate of fire, and accurate groups in full auto. While we know that these attributes aren't paramount for a real infantry rifle, they certainly are essential qualities for a video game weapon. While it wasn't the weapon's first appearance in video games, there is one franchise responsible for bringing the AEK 971 into the limelight and making it a force to be reckoned with. The AEK has been a mainstay in the Battlefield series, beginning with Bad Company 1, and while it was a dominant weapon in both Bad Company 1 and 2, it was in Battlefield 3 that the dominance of the AEK became unquestionable. True to its real-life counterpart, the AEK 971 in Battlefield 3 fired at 900 rounds per minute with relatively little recoil. And with the introduction of optics and weapon customization in Battlefield 3, the AEK could be fired more accurately than ever before. The weapon proved to be a menace, and is considered one of the best weapons in that game. Due to game rebalancing, the AEK would be an even more powerful weapon in Battlefield 4. With the same 900 rounds per minute, but even less recoil than before, the AEK in Battlefield 4 is its strongest iteration in the franchise. Was it overpowered? Well, that's a complicated question that's best left to professional game developers. But it certainly is a meta weapon, and remains a very popular choice. Outside of the Battlefield series, the AEK rifles don't show up in many video games. Perhaps due to its lack of use in professional and recreational circles alike, the AEK doesn't appear in much media at all. Even in Russian games where Russian weapons are the main focus, the AEK isn't usually present. It's possible that the rifle may see more use in the future, but for the time being, it's an interesting idea of a rifle that hasn't proved to be a significant enough upgrade over the AK platform. Small arms design is an incredibly difficult undertaking. Trying to create new and innovative firearm designs while also adhering to the requirements of potential customers is a difficult balance to strike, and is all the more difficult when competing against an established weapon platform. The AEK was a weapon designed for a different time, one where experts believed controlled full auto fire was the key to success in combat. Perhaps in the future, there may be new demand for such a weapon. After all, old ideas can be revived as new innovation. But for now, the AEK 971 remains relatively unused in the real world, and a remarkable weapon in video games. Thank you again to Warhammer 40,000 Tacticus for sponsoring this video.